Hello, I am filming a tutorial as pattern support for my Blue Morpho Cowl, which is available on Ravelry, and I will put the link down in the notes. This is the cowl, and it features a section of plain linen, one color linen stitch, a section of two color linen stitch. I've also got tutorials for both of those, and I will put the links down in the notes. And this tutorial is covering the butterfly stitch stripes, and it is these nice stockinette stripes that feature floats crossing the front of the fabric that are then gathered up to create these little butterfly shapes that go across your fabric. And it's a pretty straightforward stitch if you know how to do stockinette in the round, and it helps if you have done color work before that involves floats. Usually in stranded color work, the floats goes on the back side of the fabric, but in the butterfly stitch, the floats go on the front side in order to create this decorative element. So here are our pattern instructions, and it is a 16 row repeat, but that's just made up of two sections of 8 stitches each for the two colors. The main thing that you need to get out of this tutorial is the mechanics of making these floats and then the mechanics of catching these floats. So here is my swatch, and I just finished round 6. So in the odd numbered rounds, in color 2, which is this yellow, first I set up an establishment row in just plain stockinette in this yellow, and then the pattern is you knit 5 stitches and then you slip 5 purlwise with the yarn in front. So I just finished round 6, which was just a plain stockinette round, knit all stitches. So now we're on to round 7, which follows these instructions, and I will show you the mechanics of how you make these floats on the front of your work. If I can get my needles and my yarn organized here for you. Sorry. This is just some scrap yarn. It's not what I used in the cowl. And I'm doing a simulated in the round swatch, which is a really handy thing to know how to do if you want to do a lot of knitting in the round. So I have a few edge stitches to do first, and those are just purled. So I'm just going to purl my 3 edge stitches, and those are not part of the pattern repeat because it's just for the swatch. The pattern repeat is a 10 stitch repeat. So in my cowl pattern, when you start this butterfly stitch stripe pattern, there will be 100 stitches in the round on your needles. And if you want to adjust the size, you go up or down by a collection of 10 stitches. So these are the floats that we're creating, which are across the front of the fabric, and it's super simple. You knit 5 stitches, then you bring the yarn in front of the work, and you slip 5 as if to purl. So that was 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, in order to make sure that you have the right tension on these floats, after you slip them, stretch it out a little bit and make sure that your float is long enough to go across when it's stretched out. Then you keep knitting 5 stitches. I'll switch to my other hand so that you can see the mechanics as a right-handed knitter. I usually knit continental with my left hand. Sorry, I've got a knot in this yarn. My apologies. There we go. Okay. got that a little twisted there. Now we're back to the knitting. Okay, right-handed. So I knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bring the yarn in front and slip the next 5 as if to purl. That was 4, or was that all 5? Oops, I knit one of the 5 I was supposed to slip. Sometimes that happens. You have to make sure you get your count right. But it's really easy to undo that. So I'll just unknit that one. Okay, now you can see that I'm on the right spot because of where these other floats are lined up. Now I'll bring that yarn back in front and I will slip my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as if to purl. I'll move the yarn back to the back, stretch out my stitches to make sure that my float is long enough, and then knit 5. I do not have an exact 10 stitch repeat on this swatch. I apologize for that. So you would just continue to knit 5, move the yarn to the front, and slip 5. But that was our last stitches in color 2. So now we're going to switch to color 1 and I will show you the mechanics of how to catch these floats to create that butterfly shape. So I'm going to slide my needle back and get color 1 out of the way. Okay, now here is color 2. So this is for round 8 of the pattern repeat. I will put the pattern repeat out in the notes also. And it obviously, pattern repeat is obviously in the pattern for the cowl. It'll be in the notes, and I also have included a chart for this stitch for those of you who prefer to knit from charts. That is in the pattern for the cowl. Okay, sorry for that fumbling around. Let me do my edge stitches. And then your instructions for row 8, which are pretty much the same in row 16 as far as mechanics goes, is you will be knitting some stitches and then gathering up those loose strands. I'll let you read the instructions at your leisure in the notes. Let me just demonstrate it here. So I'm going to be knitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, got my yarn tangled up a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now we're in the middle of where those strands are. There's 3 stitches left, so I've knit 2 of the stitches that are behind the strands, and there's 3 left with this one as the center stitch. Get that back where it belongs. So you swoop under these strands. Make sure you pick up all 4 of those strands. You're kind of going them underneath them as if they were knit stitches. Then you're going into your next stitch. It's that 3rd stitch behind the strands. You knit that stitch and then you swoop back underneath those strands and catch them with that new stitch. Then you just go back to knitting you knit the last 2 that are behind the strand. Then you just knit the next 7 again. So there's 5 knit. Let me switch to my right hand for this so that people who knit with their right hands can see how that mechanics works. So there's 5 stitches behind the strands. You knit the first one and the second one. Before knitting the third one, you swoop behind these strands. Make sure you catch all 4 strands. You go into that third stitch, knit it, and then swoop back and pull that stitch out in front of the strands. And then you keep knitting. Just going to knit to the end of my round here and slide the needles back, and I will get started on the next row, but it's the same mechanics, just offset, so you can see how that looks. We have the strands caught beneath that stitch that you swooped under to catch, and it looks like I messed up that stitch there, but I can fix it as I come to it. Let me just do row 9 for you, just so that you get the feel for how the 2 rows, the 2 colors will be offset from each other in the way the strands are carried. So I'm going to do my edge stitches. I have 3 edge stitches. Now on these rounds, you're going to be slipping the 5 first. So you're going to be slipping opposite sections from what you did in color 2. Okay, there's 5 stitches. Stretch it out, make sure that your strand's going to be long enough. And then you knit these 5 stitches. Sorry, it's a little fiddly. Okay, so you see that, how it's offset, and I went 2 stitches too far over here. I was on a roll. Let me switch hands again. Yarn forward, slip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn back, stretch it out, make sure that your float is long enough, then keep knitting. You can kind of put your thumb down on the float if you knit right-handed to keep it in place. 2, 3, 4, 5, and here is the stitch that I didn't do properly. Let me just fix that real quick. There we go. Then here is where you bring the yarn forward and you slip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn to the back, stretch it out, and then keep knitting. And the mechanics of catching these floats will be exactly the same. Just follow the pattern repeat, and as long as you have these mechanics of creating the floats and catching the floats, you should have no trouble doing the 2-color butterfly stitch.